Some people say karma's a slow burn. I made it a precision strike, and I made him stand right in the blast zone. They say some buildings aren't made to last and some men aren't meant to fall. I engineered both. My name is Olivia. I'm 29 years old. And this is the story of how I watched a man destroy himself. I didn't lay a hand on him. I never shouted or threatened. I never wrote an angry email or slashed his tires. What I did was quieter, and in the end, far more complete. I learned his weaknesses, I studied the architecture of his pride, and then I carefully, patiently, over 18 months, removed every single support until there was nothing left holding him up. I just stood back and watched gravity do the rest. People talk about karma as if it's a slow, mystical wheel that turns on its own. I learned that karma, real karma, is a force of nature. And sometimes, it needs an architect. It all started with what I thought was my dream job. I was 26, fresh out of my master's program, drowning in student debt, and clutching a portfolio I'd poured my soul into. Reed Designs wasn't just a firm, it was a myth. Its skyscrapers were the teeth in the city's smile, glittering and sharp. Getting an interview felt like winning a golden ticket. Getting the job, I cried in the bathroom stall for 10 minutes after the call. The owner was Carter Reed. To the world, he was a visionary, a self-made titan. His face was in business magazines, always with that trademark half-smile, a look that said he knew a secret you didn't. In person, the charm was overwhelming. He had a way of focusing on you that made you feel like the only person in a crowded room. On my third day, he stopped by my drafting table, a cluttered island in a sea of sleek desks. The Morris concept for the waterfront park, he said, tapping a printout of my grad school thesis project. The graduated terraces, it's interesting, naive but with a good bone structure. My heart hammered against my ribs. He'd looked at my work. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Carter, he corrected, smiling. We're not formal here, we're builders. That idea, the way you've tried to blend the green space with the urban flow, it's fighting the city, not dancing with it. But the fight is compelling. I like a fighter, Olivia. That was it. He saw a fighter. He chose me. I became his special project, his personal protégé. He took me to client lunches, let me sit in on high-level meetings just to listen, and called my perspective refreshingly unjaded. For a year, I was dazzled. I wore his approval like a coat of armor. The long hours, the takeout dinners at my desk, the constant pressure, it was all fuel. I was part of something important, something big. But in any dazzling light, your eyes eventually adjust, and you start to see the shadows in the corners. I learned to ignore the whispers first. The way senior designers would be in Carter's office one day, voices raised behind the glass, and then just gone the next. Pursuing other opportunities, the HR memos would say. Their projects would seamlessly transfer to someone else, usually with Carter's name now prominently attached. I told myself that was the price of working at the top. It was a shark tank. You had to keep moving. The first real crack in that shiny surface was a man named Ben Sorrento. Ben had been at Reed Designs for a decade. He was quiet, bald by 35, with kind eyes and fingers always stained with ink from his beloved fountain pens. He was old school, drafting beautiful details by hand before digitizing them. He was designing the Laurent Contemporary Art Museum, a project that was his baby. I'd sneak glances at his desk. The sketches were breathtaking. Fluid, bold shapes that looked both heavy and like they might float away. I was taking minutes in the big client presentation for the Laurent. Carter stood at the head of the polished granite table, the client board hanging on his every word. He put up the renderings, the beautiful, flowing forms. My vision here, he said, his voice a low, confident rumble, was to create not just a container for art, but a piece of art that interacts with the city. The cantilever here, the play of light in the central atrium, it's about challenging perception. He used words like my process, my initial sketches, my dialogue with the space. He never said Ben's name, not once. Ben sat at the far end of the table, his head down, doodling on a notepad. His neck was bright red. After the clients left, ecstatic, Carter clapped Ben on the shoulder. Great teamwork, Ben. You really brought my concepts to life. A month later, Ben was gone. A misalignment with the firm's innovative direction, the internal email read. I saw Ben clearing out his desk, carefully boxing his ink bottles and his faded blueprints. He looked defeated. I brought him a coffee, my hands shaking slightly. He does this, you know, Ben said softly, not looking at me. He finds the talent, he consumes it, and when there's nothing left of the original spark but his own reflection, he spits out the husk. You're bright, Olivia. Don't let him make you a husk. I mumbled something inadequate, something about being sorry. The guilt sat in my stomach like a cold stone, but I rationalized it. That's just how business is. It's brutal. Be smart, Olivia. Don't be sentimental. Don't be like Ben. The second crack was my own work, my own little piece of soul. Carter called it a passion project, a chance to build my humanitarian brand. It was a community center for the Ridgeview neighborhood, a part of the city the skyline forgot. A real, honest-to-goodness chance to do some tangible good. I didn't sleep for weeks. I met with community leaders, with kids at the rec center, with elderly folks at the library. I designed a place with a vegetable garden on the roof, a tech lab with clear, open windows, a multi-purpose hall with a stage for school plays. It was warm, it was safe, it was hopeful. The community board voted unanimously to approve my design. The city grants came through. I was prouder of those blueprints than anything I'd ever done. Carter called me into his office. The view was spectacular, the entire city laid out like a model train set. He was smiling. Olivia, this Ridgeview work is exceptional. Truly, it's got heart, and that's exactly why it's perfect. My smile faltered. Perfect for what? For the Veridian, he said, as if it were obvious. The Veridian was his newest, most lavish hotel project, slated for a gentrifying area just north of Ridgeview. We're going to integrate your community center as the ground floor annex. The main entrance to the hotel will flow through it. Think of the synergy, luxury meets grassroots. It's a story the press will eat up. I felt the floor tilt. Integrate it? Carter, it's a standalone center. The grants, the community approval, it's all for a specific building on a specific plot, not a lobby. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes cooled a few degrees. The grants will be repurposed. The city wants the Veridian's tax revenue. The community will get a better facility, attached to a 5-star hotel. It's an upgrade. He slid a new set of plans across the desk. My beautiful, humble building was now a stylized, glass-walled atrium. The garden was a vertical green feature behind the concierge desk. The tech lab was a business center for guests. I can't, I whispered. You can, he said, his voice losing all its charm, becoming flat and final. You can sign these as co-designer, your name next to mine. It will be the project that puts you on the map. Or, he leaned back, gesturing to the door, you can follow your principals out that door. Your student loans, I believe, are quite substantial. The cold stone in my gut turned to ice. I thought of my tiny apartment, the relentless calls from loan services, the mountain of debt that felt like it would bury me. I thought of my parents, so proud I worked at Reed. I thought of my empty bank account. My dream was right here, but it was covered in slime. I took the pen. I signed my name on the line that made me a collaborator in my own betrayal. The script was elegant, but it felt like carving a wound. I sold my little piece of good for a line on a resume and a temporary shield from financial ruin. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the cold, hard stone in my gut now a permanent, frozen weight. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was anger. Slow burning, shameful, and deep. But the last crack, the one that shattered the entire damn window, was my little brother, Jake. Jake is 3 years younger than me. Where I see lines and forms and potential, Jake sees structure, integrity, load-bearing truth. He's a civil engineer, but really, he's a builder in the oldest, purest sense. He believes things should be solid, honest, and true. He got a job with the major contracting firm overseeing Carter's magnum opus, the Apex Tower. Jake was over the moon. He called me every other day, his voice buzzing with excitement. The foundation pilings live their engineering art. Or, we're using a new composite on the east face, it's gonna play with the light like crazy. Then, the calls stopped. When I finally got him to answer, his voice was flat hollow. There's stuff, Liv, it's not right. He'd found discrepancies. The concrete batch reports didn't match the delivery tickets. The tensile strength ratings on a shipment of structural steel were below the specification in the plans. It wasn't a minor oversight. It was a cost-cutting measure that compromised safety margins. My good, honest brother did exactly what he was supposed to do. He reported it to his site supervisor. The supervisor patted him on the back and did nothing. Jake, stubborn and true, went over his head. He emailed the project manager at Reed Designs, laying out the evidence. Carter didn't fire Jake. He annihilated him. A week later, Jake was called into a meeting with his boss, a Reed Designs HR rep, and a stern-faced man from legal. They presented printed emails, supposedly from Jake's account, to a materials supplier, discussing rebates for approving the substandard shipments. The invoices were doctored to make it look like Jake had authorized the cheaper materials and was getting a kickback. It was a clumsy, transparent forgery to anyone who knew Jake, but it was paper. It was evidence. He wasn't just fired for cause, he was escorted off the site. The story spread through the industry like a stain. Jake Morris, the engineer who cut corners for cash. No other firm would return his calls. His professional reputation, the thing he'd built his identity on, was ash. I went to see him. His apartment, usually chaotic with schematics and sports gear, was dark and still. He sat on the couch, not watching the TV that flickered silently. The light was gone from his eyes. The builder in him was broken. He just looked empty. "I'll fix this," I promised, my voice thick. "I'll talk to Carter." He just shook his head slowly. "Don't live, he'll break you too." But I had to. I marched into Carter Reed's office the next morning, bypassing his assistant. He was on the phone, laughing. He held up a finger, finished his call with a smooth, "We'll celebrate soon," and turned to me. "Olivia, to what do I owe the Jake Morris, my brother? You framed him." All pretense of pleasantry vanished. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I did no such thing. Your brother engaged in fraudulent activity. He endangered my project and my reputation. He was dealt with." "He reported a safety issue," I cried, tears of fury springing to my eyes. "You know he did. Please, Carter, just retract it. Clear his name. You can do it with one call. He's just a kid. His life is ruined." He looked at me with an expression of pure clinical disdain. There was no anger in it, just the cool assessment of a problem. "Sentimentality, Olivia," he said, the word dripping with contempt, "is the most profound weakness. It clouds judgment. It leads to poor decisions. Your brother made a series of poor decisions. He built his own trap. I simply ensured it snapped shut." He stood up, walking to the window, looking out at his kingdom. "You, on the other hand, have shown remarkable resilience, a capacity for difficult choices." He turned back, his gaze piercing. "You have a very, very bright future here, a future I've personally invested in. Don't make me reconsider your entire blueprint." It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. In that moment, looking at him silhouetted against the skyline he owned, the cold, frozen stone in my gut ignited. It melted into a white-hot, silent fury. This wasn't just a ruthless businessman. This was a predator. A man who saw people as resources to be mined and discarded, principles as obstacles to be demolished, and truth as clay to be shaped to his will. The world's idea of karma, a slow, gentle wheel, was a comforting lie for people who could afford to wait. Carter Reed would never trip. He would keep climbing on a ladder made of broken people, and he would win over and over again, unless someone took the ladder away. I decided in that crystal-clear moment of rage that someone would be me. But I wouldn't fight him head-on. That's what he expected. That's what he was good at: public battles, power plays, legal warfare. I would be quieter. I would be smarter. I would be a ghost in his machine. I would use his own tools, his bottomless ego, his transactional greed, his pathological need to be the king of the castle, against him. I would study him like a complex system, find every flaw in the code, and then I would write the virus myself. The first phase of my operation was total immersion. I became the most perfect employee Reed Designs had ever seen. More dedicated, more resourceful, more obsequiously loyal. I praised his ideas before he'd finished voicing them. I laughed at his jokes. I volunteered for the grunt work no one else wanted, especially tasks that brought me closer to his inner workings. I made myself indispensable, the reliable cog he never had to think about. I needed him to trust me implicitly, to see me as an extension of his own will. And he did. He gave me more access, admin rights to project servers, the duty of organizing his sensitive digital files, the password to his executive calendar. I became the keeper of his time and the guardian of his digital gate. My first major objective was his secret archive. Carter was too arrogant for a paper trail, but he was meticulous in his own way. He had a private, encrypted server partition he called the King's Archive. It was protected by a rotating 16-character password. I thought about what he truly valued. Not people, not memories, things, symbols, his buildings. His cars, his public persona. His license plate on his black Maybach was CKN gone. King one. It was so obvious it was almost childish. I tried it as a base. CKN gone Apex. Access denied. CKN gone Veridian, denied. I thought of his first major project, the one he always referenced in interviews, the Vega Tower. CKN gone Vega. The vault hissed open. Inside was the unvarnished truth. Not the glossy brochures, but the dirty wiring behind the walls. There were folders, municipal adjustments, bribes to city planning officials, documented as consulting fees, supply-side economics, the real contracts with suppliers showing the inferior materials, alongside the fake invoices for the investors. Personnel revisions, dossiers on employees like Ben, with notes on how to discredit them, and the fake paper trail created for Jake. Financial streams, a labyrinth of shell companies moving money to offshore accounts. It was all there, the proof of every rotten thing, a monument to his corruption. I didn't download it all at once. That would trigger data alerts. Instead, over the next 6 months, I became a digital ghost. During late nights when I was catching up on work, I would siphon files, piece by piece, onto multiple encrypted flash drives I kept in a Faraday bag at the back of my underwear drawer. I cataloged everything. This was my insurance policy, my nuclear option. But it wasn't my weapon. Unleashing it would cause a scandal, maybe even jail time, but with his lawyers and his narrative control, he might survive. I needed something more elegant, more poetic. I needed him to be the author of his own ruin. My revenge needed to be a structure. It needed a deep foundation, load-bearing supports, and a final, spectacular collapse. I planned it in 3 interlocking phases, each one weakening a different part of his empire. Phase 1, the money pit. Carter's newest obsession was Seaside, a massive, ultra-luxury residential development on a stretch of protected Oregon coastline. It was a battle he relished. Environmentalists, led by a fiercely intelligent marine biologist named Dr. Anya Petrova, were fighting him with every legal tool they had. Carter saw it as the ultimate challenge, conquering not just a market, but nature itself and the pesky morals that defended it. I created a ghost, an anonymous email account via a series of proxies with a name that meant nothing. Concerned Citizen 2022. I spent weeks studying Anya's work, her rhetoric, her strategy. Then I reached out. I didn't lead with Carter Reed is evil. She wouldn't have trusted that. I led with data. I sent her the real environmental impact assessments that Carter's team had commissioned and then buried. The ones that showed irreversible damage to the coastal aquifer, the endangerment of a key seabird nesting ground. I sent her the geological surveys that questioned the stability of the cliffs for his planned foundations. I gave her the truth he was hiding. I armed his enemy with indisputable facts. Concurrently, at work, I played a different role. In strategy meetings, I would voice carefully crafted concerns. Anya Petrova's group seems unusually well-prepared, Carter, I'd say, frowning at reports. Their arguments are sticking in the media. Maybe we need to stop playing defense. Go all in, overwhelm them, show the strength of Reed designs. Blanket the airwaves, hire the top constitutional lawyers, make it a public spectacle of our commitment. I framed it as a show of force, a demonstration of his invincibility. It appealed directly to his ego. The idea of a grand, expensive, public war that he would win through sheer dominance and financial firepower. He took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. He diverted millions from firm capital, from investor pools, even from his personal fortune, into the seaside battle. He was pouring a fortune into a war he was destined to lose, because I had secretly given the other side the blueprints to his defenses. Phase 2, the hollowing. A building with a crumbling core will fall, even if the facade is pristine. I identified 2 key pillars of Carter's operational talent who had been used and bruised. Sarah Chen, a luminous interior designer whose holistic space concepts Carter constantly poached, rebranding them as his biophilic design philosophy. And David Shaw, a meticulous project manager Carter, had once screamingly humiliated in front of a dozen subcontractors for a delay that was Carter's own fault. I didn't approach them as fellow victims. That would have been too dangerous, too emotional. Instead, I became a friend, a confidant. Over coffee, I'd casually mention impressive job openings at rival, more ethical firms. I'd connect them subtly with headhunters I knew were discreet. I'd talk about quality of life and creative freedom and working with integrity. I helped Sarah polish her portfolio, highlighting work Carter had stolen. I helped David draft a narrative about his leadership that countered Carter's humiliation. Slowly, patiently, over months, I helped them build escape chutes. Sarah left for a renowned boutique firm in San Francisco. David was poached by a tech giant to oversee their campus expansion. Their departures were blows to Carter's operational efficiency, but he was too focused on his very public, very expensive war in Oregon to notice the quiet erosion within his own walls. His empire was being hollowed out. Phase 3, the masterstroke. Carter's pride, his literal and figurative peak, was the apex tower. It was weeks from completion. The grand opening gala was the social event of the season, a black-tie affair for the city's elite, investors, and press. The tower wasn't just tall, it was smart. A fully integrated AI system controlled everything: climate, lighting, elevator banks, security, even the artistic water features in the lobby. Carter never stopped boasting about it. It was the beating heart of his masterpiece, the brain that proved he was building the future. My university minor was in computational design. I was very, very good with systems, with code. By now, my trusted position gave me full access to the Apex Tower's operational specifications and vendor portals. I found a backdoor, a little-used maintenance protocol in the building management system provided by a third-party vendor. The security was laughable. They never expected an attack from inside the architectural team. Over several late nights, I wrote a program, a small, elegant, deeply buried piece of code, a sleeper virus. This virus had one specific financial trigger: the real-time stock price of Reed Development Holdings, Carter's publicly traded company. If it fell below a certain threshold, a number I set to indicate serious, sustained trouble, the virus would wake up. And when it did, it wouldn't cause structural damage. I would never risk lives. That would make me a monster like him. No, it would cause something far worse for a man like Carter: profound, public humiliation. It would make his brilliant, sophisticated building look like a clown car. The lighting would strobe erratically. The climate control would blast between Arctic and tropical. The elegant background music would glitch and warp into absurd, carnival-like tunes. Most critically, the building's smooth, cultured AI voice, the one he demoed on talk shows, would recite a series of damning, randomized system alerts, pulling phrases from a bank I'd written. Integrity check failure. Financial viability compromised. Architectural oversight anomaly detected. It would turn his moment of supreme triumph into a very expensive, very public joke. The trigger tied his financial vanity directly to the physical proof of his failure. The trap was now fully engineered. The money pit was dug and baited. The internal structure was hollowed. The bomb was placed in the crown jewel. All the supports were sawn through. All I had to do was wait for him to step onto the stage for his final bow. The day it all happened was obscenely beautiful. A crisp, blue-sky autumn day, the kind that makes the city gleam. Carter was in a euphoric mood. He swept into the office like Caesar returning to Rome. "Today's the day, Olivia," he boomed, clapping his hands together. "The Coastal Commission votes on Seaside this morning. And tonight," he gestured grandly towards the window, where the apex tower pierced the sky, "tonight we crown the king. My legacy is complete." He was already tasting the champagne, already hearing the applause. I offered him my most polished, loyal smile, the one that reached my eyes because behind them, I was watching the first domino tremble. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Carter. At 10 o'clock, I pulled up the live stream of the commission hearing on my secondary monitor. I watched as Anya Petrova took the stand. She was calm, methodical, and utterly devastating. Using the data I had provided, she dismantled Carter's environmental report not with emotion, but with cold, hard, irrefutable science. She showed satellite time lapses, core samples, hydrological models. The commissioners, several of whom Carter had wined and dined, shifted in their seats, their faces growing stony. Carter's high-priced lawyers floundered, their arguments based on the falsified reports now sounding hollow and deceitful. By 11:30, it was a foregone conclusion. The vote was unanimous and swift. The Seaside project was dead. Permits denied, a vibration in my pocket. My secret, prepaid burner phone bought with cash months ago. A text from an unknown number, a code we'd agreed upon. The tide is out, for good. Thank you, low tide. I deleted the message, removed the SIM card, and crushed it under my heel in the restroom. By noon, the financial news networks were buzzing like angry hornets. Chyrons flashed. Reed Development suffers catastrophic blow. Seaside Project SCOOPED. The stock price of RD Holdings, which had been stagnant, began to slide. It wasn't a crash yet, just a sickening, steady slide, a leak in a dam. Carter stormed back into the office just after 1. The charming facade was in shattered pieces on the floor. His face was mottled with rage. He screamed at his executive assistant, hurled a porcelain paperweight at the wall it missed, shattering a framed award, and slammed his office door so hard the glass wall shuddered. Through it, I could see him pacing like a caged animal, screaming into his phone, gesticulating wildly. But he still had the gala. The tower. He could still salvage the day, reclaim the narrative. I saw the moment he decided to double down. He straightened his tie in the reflection of the window, his jaw clenched. The show, indeed, would go on. At 4 o'clock, he emerged. He had recomposed himself, but it was a brittle performance. He looked pale, his eyes a little too wide, like a man holding back a tidal wave with sheer will. "Let's go," he said, his voice tight. "We have a legacy to celebrate." The Apex Tower's grand lobby was a scene of breathtaking opulence. A 3-story atrium of imported marble, a living wall of ferns, a central water sculpture that danced to hidden music. The city's elite swirled in a sea of black ties and glittering gowns. Camera flashes popped like tiny supernovas. Carter moved through the crowd, shaking hands, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was a politician on election night, working the room. He climbed the few steps to the low stage, tapping the microphone. The crowd hushed. He launched into his speech. It was about vision, about perseverance, about shaping the future. He glossed over the Seaside loss as a temporary detour, a lesson in resilience. He raised a glass towards the soaring ceiling. "But this," his voice swelled, "this is what endures. This is not just a building, it is a statement, a testament to what human will can achieve." He was raising his glass for the toast when the past walked through the main doors. I hadn't told them to come. I had simply, over the past year, given them the tools. I had anonymously mailed Ben Sorrento a drive containing all his original Laurent Museum files, time-stamped and indisputable. I had sent Jake's former union foreman, a man named Hank who believed in Jake's innocence, the real material safety reports, and the forensics on the doctored emails. I had given them the truth, the evidence, and the courage. They chose the moment. As Carter's glass hovered in the air, Ben's voice, clear and strong, cut through the expectant silence. "A statement built on theft, Carter?" Every head in the room swiveled. Ben stood there, not in a tuxedo, but in a simple jacket and slacks. He held a tablet aloft, its screen glowing with his beautiful, hand-drawn sketches. "These are the original concepts for the Laurent Museum. My concepts. You know they are. You presented them as your own." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Before Carter could sputter a denial, Hank stepped forward, his work boots stark against the marble. He was a big man with a voice that carried. "And it's built on lies. The steel in the West Core doesn't meet spec. The concrete is below grade. You set up Jake Morris to take the fall for your cheap shortcuts." Chaos erupted. The crowd's murmur became a roar of shock and excitement. Reporters, who had been there for a puff piece, now surged forward, cameras and microphones thrust toward the stage, toward Ben, toward Hank. Carter stood frozen, the champagne flute trembling slightly in his hand. His face had gone from pale to a sickly gray. "This is slander," he shouted, but his voice was thin, lost in the noise. "Security. Remove these liars." But the damage was no longer containable. It was live and it was viral. I glanced at my phone, discreetly held below the table. News alerts were blasting. Scandal ERUPTS AT Apex Tower Gala. Fraud, theft allegations cloud Reed's masterpiece. The stock ticker for RD Holdings, which had been sliding, now went into a sheer, vertical freefall. The numbers tumbled, down 12%. 15, 18 Carter, desperate to regain control, to reclaim the narrative, lunged for the microphone again, knocking over his glass. The crystal shattered on the stage. "These are lies from bitter, failed people," he screamed, his voice cracking with strain, echoing in the now hushed, horrified room. "This building is perfect. It is flawless. It is my life's work. There is nothing wrong with it." He was shouting the last words, spit flying, his eyes wild, when the tower itself answered him. The stock had just crossed the threshold. 22% down. The trigger was pulled. The sleeper virus woke up. The elegant, ambient lighting in the vast lobby didn't just flicker. It launched into a frenetic, chaotic strobe, flashing between blinding white, emergency red, and a sickly green, turning the glittering crowd into a jerky, silent movie. The soft, sophisticated jazz filtering through the hidden speakers distorted violently, warping into a loud, tinny, sped-up version of Pop Goes the Weasel. People cried out, covering their ears, stumbling in the disorienting light. Then the building's own voice, the smooth, cultured, British-accented AI that Carter had personally selected, spoke. It was calm, measured, and in the context, utterly horrifying. "Alert," it announced, as if commenting on the weather. "Comprehensive system diagnostic initiated. Financial stability module, critical failure. Structural integrity verification, anomalies detected. Refer to file, Westcore spec discrepancy. Architect authority assessment, credibility compromised. Recommend immediate audit of primary stakeholder, Carter Reed. Structural integrity anomalies, architect credibility compromised." The words hung in the air, synthesized and pitiless. His perfect, intelligent, state-of-the-art building was publicly diagnosing him as a fraud. The silence that followed was deeper than any quiet I have ever known. It was the sound of a reputation imploding. You could hear the drip of the now-frozen water sculpture. You could hear the rustle of a woman's gown as she took a step back. The chief city building inspector, a man Carter had golfed with for years, slowly set down his drink on a passing tray, his face a mask of professional horror. The lead investor from Dubai turned on his heel and walked out, his security detail closing around him. A domino effect of disgust and retreat began, and Carter just stood there, alone on the stage in the middle of the flashing, stupid lights and the childish music. The microphone had slipped from his hand and swung by its cord, thumping dully against the side of the podium. Tap, tap, tap. All the color, all the life had drained from him. He looked shrunken inside his impeccably tailored tuxedo. He was a shell. His eyes were wide, unblinking, scanning the room, the retreating backs of his guests, the hungry lenses of the cameras, the damning evidence held in Ben's and Hank's hands. He saw his empire, not crumbling, but evaporating in real time before his eyes. And then, as if pulled by a puppeteer's string, his head turned. His gaze, empty and shattered, swept across the sea of stunned and retreating faces and landed on me. I was standing off to the side, near the towering ferns of the living wall. I wasn't running. I wasn't cheering. I wasn't even smiling. I was perfectly, utterly still. And I was looking right back at him. Our eyes locked across the ruined party. In that moment, I didn't hide a thing. I didn't wear the mask of the loyal protégé or the scared girl or the ambitious climber. I let him see me. The real me, the patient one, the quiet one. The architect, the girl who had studied his weaknesses, learned his language, and then written his downfall in a code he never thought to check. I saw the understanding hit him. It wasn't a realization of one single act, not the leaked files, not the whispered advice, not the code in his precious system. It was the horrifying, dawning comprehension of the design. He saw the blueprint. He saw how the draining money pit, the hollowed-out team, the bomb in the tower, the invited ghosts of his past, how every single piece fit together. He saw that the catastrophe wasn't an accident or a string of bad luck. It was engineered. It was cause and effect, with a chilling mathematical precision. And I was the cause. He didn't point a trembling finger. He didn't scream my name. His jaw worked, but no sound emerged. He just stared, the last flickering light of his crumbling world reflected in his hollow eyes as he realized he hadn't been toppled by a rival or fate or the market. He'd been dismantled by the quiet girl in the corner, the one he'd never seen as a threat, the one he thought he owned. He finally looked away, his shoulders collapsing inwards as if all the strings had been cut. He just stood there, alone on the stage in the carnival of his own making, as the last of his legacy dissolved into noise and light and nothingness. The aftermath was a swift and merciless tide. The gala ended in a panicked, disorderly rush. The city building department issued a full stop work and occupancy order on the Apex Tower at dawn the next day. The story was the only thing the news talked about for a week. The evidence from my insurance files, which I anonymously parceled out to the SEC, the FBI, the Attorney General, and 3 major newspapers, provided the roadmap for the investigations. Carter Reed was arrested on 17 counts, including fraud, bribery, securities fraud, and perjury. His assets were frozen. Reed Development Holdings filed for bankruptcy within the month. The Apex Tower was eventually sold for pennies on the dollar, stripped of his name, and completely overhauled. Carter, last I heard, is serving a 12 to 15-year sentence in a minimum security prison. He writes letters to former colleagues, proclaiming his innocence. No one writes back. Ben Sorrento used his settlement and the publicity to open a small, critically acclaimed studio. He teaches a famous seminar on intellectual property and ethics in design. Sarah Chen is a star on the West Coast, winning awards for humane, beautiful spaces. David Shaw is beloved at his tech campus, known for his fair and brilliant management. And Jake, my brother Jake, the official investigation, fueled by the evidence I provided, completely and publicly exonerated him. His name was scrubbed clean. A major, internationally respected engineering firm, impressed by his integrity in the face of extreme pressure, headhunted him. He's now their director of ethical compliance and safety. He's building again, not just structures, but systems of accountability. The light is back in his eyes. Brighter, maybe, because it's been tested. That was the only victory that ever truly mattered to me. The only one that warmed the cold place inside. As for me, I had to testify. It was the condition of my immunity deal. I sat in a stark, fluorescent-lit room at a wooden table that felt like it absorbed sound, and I told the truth. All of it. I told them about the community center I let him steal. I described the cold weight in my stomach as I signed my name. I showed them how to navigate the King's Archive, the digital vault whose password was his vanity. I explained the financial trails, the shell companies, the doctored reports. I identified the voices on secret recordings, the faces in photographs with envelopes changing hands. The prosecutors were polite but relentless. The defense attorney, a sleek shark in a $5,000 suit, tried to paint me as a spurned lover, a jealous underling, an unreliable narrator out for revenge. He asked me about my feelings for Carter. I looked right at him and said, my feelings were irrelevant. He was a system I was trying to understand. And once I understood it, I documented its failures. He asked if I felt guilty for my role in the Ridgeview betrayal. I said, every day, that guilt is why I'm here. He couldn't touch that. He tried to suggest I planted the evidence in the Apex Tower systems. I had anticipated this. I had logs, timestamps, a digital trail showing my access was for legitimate design integration work. The malicious code, forensics showed, was introduced through a vendor backdoor, its origin obfuscated. They could suspect me, but they couldn't prove it, and they didn't really want to. I was giving them Carter Reed on a platter. The trial was a media circus, but I was a ghost in it. Olivia Morris, the whistleblower, the mysterious protégé. I gave no interviews. I made no statements. I wore simple, dark clothing and walked with my head down through the gauntlet of cameras. The story they wanted was Carter's fall, not my rise. I was just the catalyst. In the end, Carter was convicted on all major counts. The sentence was long enough to mean something, but not so long that it felt like vengeance from the state. It felt like balance. When the gavel fell, there was no dramatic cry from him. He just nodded slowly, as if a complex calculation had finally been solved, and the answer was one he'd expected but hoped to avoid. He was led away. I never saw him again. The financial whistleblower reward was substantial. A percentage of the funds recovered by the government. It felt like blood money and liberation all at once. The first thing I did was pay off my parents' mortgage. The look on my mom's face, the sheer relief as decades of worry melted away, that was the second victory that mattered. The third was Ridgeview. I reached out to the community board personally. I met with Mrs. Guerrero, the fierce grandmother who had championed my original design. I thought she might spit in my face. Instead, she looked at me with weary, understanding eyes. He was a powerful man, honey. He bent a lot of good people. I showed her the new plans. Not the stolen, twisted hotel annex, but my original blueprints, refined. I had used part of the reward money to buy a better, sun-drenched plot of land 2 blocks over, donated by the city in a quiet deal to make amends. I told her I would fund the construction entirely. That my firm, a new, tiny thing I was starting, would oversee it pro bono. That it would be called the Jake Morris Community Center. She took my hands, her palms rough and warm. "You're trying to come home," she said. It wasn't a question. I just nodded, tears finally pricking my eyes. "All right then," she said. "Let's build it." The construction was the cleanest, most joyful process I've ever been part of. Jake consulted on the engineering, of course. We used local contractors. Kids from the neighborhood painted a mural on the construction fence. When it opened, the smell of new wood and fresh paint was like a baptism. There was a band and food and the sound of children laughing in a space that was finally, unequivocally, theirs. Jake cut the ribbon. Seeing him there, in a hard hat, smiling widely, surrounded by people cheering for a building that bore his name, that was the day I felt the frozen stone in my gut finally, completely, melt away. I don't work in corporate architecture anymore. The skyscraper arms race holds no allure. My firm, Morris and Associates, is just me, a brilliant, environmentally minded architect named Lisa whom I poached from the ruins of Reed Designs, and a rotating intern. We operate out of a renovated loft with big windows and rescued furniture. We specialize in adaptive reuse and deeply sustainable, affordable housing. We take old warehouses, failing strip malls, abandoned schools, and we give them new life as homes, co-op workspaces, community hubs. The work is humble. It's about stitching the urban fabric back together, not tearing holes in the sky. It heals. Lisa never asked me about Carter Reed. On her first day, she said, "I'm here for the work you do now. The past is a foundation, not a floor plan." I knew then I'd hired the right person. My life is quiet. I have a small apartment with a view of a park, not the skyline. I have a dog, a rescue mutt who hates men in suits, which makes me laugh. I go on dates sometimes. It's hard to explain what I do, what I've done. I usually just say I'm an architect who focuses on rehabilitation. It's true in more ways than one. People ask me, sometimes, if it felt good, watching Carter fall, if there was a moment of triumph. The closest I came to triumph was seeing Jake smile again. The rest of it didn't feel like joy. It felt like the silence after a long, terrifying storm. A deep, hollow, clean silence. It felt like a crooked painting, one that had been hanging wrong on the wall for so long you'd gotten a neck ache from looking at it, had finally been set straight. The relief wasn't exciting. It was profound. I think about karma a lot now. I don't believe in a cosmic scorekeeper. I believe in physics. Newton's third law: for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Carter spent his life applying terrible, selfish, distorting force to the world. He pushed people down, he bent rules, he warped truth to create his monuments. All I did was study the direction of that force, calculate its vectors, and identify the point of maximum stress. I didn't create the opposing reaction. I just made sure he was standing squarely at the epicenter when it arrived. I engineered the conditions for natural consequences to play out. I turned his own momentum against him. He was always a building with a spectacular, glittering facade and a core riddled with dry rot, faulty wiring, and stolen materials. I didn't have to knock him down. I just had to trigger the right stress test. I gave him one last, hard, resonant shake, and I watched him fall. The experience left me with a permanent awareness. I see systems everywhere now. In buildings, in organizations, in people. I see the load-bearing walls of ego, the hidden conduits of greed, the stress points of neglected integrity. I understand how things hold together. And I understand, intimately, how they fall apart. Sometimes, on the anniversary of that day, I'll take a walk. I'll end up across the street from the tower that was once the apex. It's called the Aurora now. The lights in its lobby are warm and steady. People come and go, living their lives, unaware of the ghost in its machine or the man who built its bones. I don't feel anything for the building. It's just a structure. It's been purified. I feel something for the girl I was, the one who was dazzled, the one who was afraid, the one who signed her name on the line. I don't hate her. I understand her. She was trying to survive in a system designed by a predator. She learned the hard way that you can't win in a rigged game. You have to change the game, or you have to walk away and build your own. I built my own. My name is Olivia Morris. I am an architect, and that is my story.